Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's top 10 Garak episodes. In this video I count down my top 10 favorite episodes that feature the character Garak. Now this top 10 list is not based on the episode itself or how good the episode itself is, but more of Garak's contribution to the episode and how good the character of Garak is used in this episode. Now, it doesn't mean that he has to be a central figure. I'm including episodes that he only has a somewhat small appearance as well, if that appearance is used really well. So this video is a patron suggested video. It was suggested by patron Cardinal Doomsday. So yeah, Garak, have not been shy of saying on my channel that Garak is one of my all-time favorite characters in the entire Star Trek franchise. Certainly Deep Space Nine. And he's one of the things that I think endears Deep Space Nine so much to me, and one of the major factors in why I consider Deep Space Nine one of my all-time favorite shows and my favorite Star Trek show. And I'm not the only one who loves Garak. There's a lot of love for this character because he's portrayed amazingly well by Andrew Robinson, and he adds so much flavor and color to Deep Space Nine in a way that no other character really in any of the other Star Trek shows do. And in fact, is part of what makes Deep Space Nine so unique from the other shows. So now let me get into my top 10 favorite Garak episodes. Now, for each episode, I'm going to start with a quote from Garak, because that's the one thing that's so good about Garak, is he has so many great quotes. And I almost made this like a top 10 Garak quote video, but I decided to stick with episodes because, yeah, Garak has so many amazing quotes. So I'll begin each episode list by quoting one of his awesome quotes. So I'll start with my number 10 favorite Garak episode, and that is The Search Part 2. I'm glad to see the plan is going as scheduled. What plan is that? You mean no one told you? You see, I pretend to be their friend, and then I shoot you. Now, I gotta be honest, it's that quote alone that put this episode on the top 10 list for me. Now, because you know, you could argue this isn't really Garak. This is just like because this happens in like in a dream-induced state or whatever that the Defiant crew are in over in the Gamma Quadrant. So this isn't really Garak. It's just like the crew's perception of Garak. But it's interesting that the crew's perception of Garak would behave in the way. And I just love that line. That line's amazing. It's also in the episode Garak plays the role of being one of the only ones actually who isn't one of the members of the crew who's actually in this delusional state, who can see through the bullshit that's going on, because in this episode there's like the Federation and Dominion are making a peace treaty, but you can tell that's just the Dominion's way of getting a foothold, and Garak is the only imaginary character, if you will, that recognizes it. So it's really interesting that the crew think that way of Garak, that he was able to see through the bullshit. But most of all, it's that line. And that line is pure gold. It's one of the best Garak lines in the entire show, so I had to put it on the list just for that. So then we get to number 9 on the list, Cardassians. I believe in coincidences. Coincidences happen every day, but I don't trust coincidences. It's a pretty cool line. So this is Garak's second appearance. He first appeared in the second episode of Deep Space Nine, or third, depending on how you look at it, past prologue. And so in that episode, he was kind of weird. He was kind of blah blah blah. They kind of changed his character a bit from that episode, and this is the first time you really see him as the Garak that we've come to know and love. And that's interesting because there was almost a whole year after that episode, so I wasn't even sure if they'd bring Garak back or if he'd become a recurring character, and this is the first little flavor you get of him. And I think he's used extremely well in this episode, as he's the one who sort of pushing this investigation. He knows he can't outright do it himself, so he uses Bashir in order to uncover Gul Dukat's conspiracy. And this is also the first inkling you get that there's a feud between Garak and Dukat. And it is interesting the way that Garak is constantly pulling the strings behind Bashir. And I love the scene where Bashir tries to call him on this and confront him on this, and Garak just is very sort of smart ass to him, because for Bashir finally standing up to him, he's like, "Very good, Doctor," and sort of condescending to him. So I guess that shows the kind of character Garak is. And also, this was early in their relationship, so it's a good episode. So next we get into my number 8, which is Tacking into the Wind. "You're still Cardassian, Garak. You're not going to kill one of your own people for a Bajoran woman. How little you understand me." Now, this is one of the episodes towards the end of the season that was closing out the sort of Dominion War story arc, and this was when Garak was working with Damar and his resistant movement. The person I just quoted was Rusat, this guy who's being a pain in the ass to Kira. Now, in this episode, Garak wasn't really being like the deceptive, creepy Garak. He was more on Team Odo and Kira, but that's because he knew they were the best chance of winning the war, not necessarily because he was best buds with them or had friends from the Alliance. He knew they were mean to an end, but still, he did have some allegiance to them, and he could tell that Rusat was a hindrance on their plan to actually defeat the Dominion, so he had no compunction of killing one of his own, as he just said. And so mainly in this episode, he's sort of just a helping hand for Odo and Kira, but what I love about this and what made me put this on this list was the Mexican standoff at the end of the episode, where that quote is from, where Rusat tries, points a phaser at Kira, and then Garak points a phaser at Rusat, and then Damar points a phaser at Garak, so it becomes a Tarantino-esque sort of Mexican standoff thing. And I love it how when Rusat is like taunting Kira and being like, "I'm gonna kill you," Garak's just like, "I'm still here, Rusat." It was just so awesome in that one scene, so that's why it made the list for me. So next we get into my number 7, which is Second Skin. "I'll go along on your fool's errand, but I want one thing to be perfectly clear. I have no intention of sacrificing my life to save yours. If it looks like we're in danger of being captured, if there's any sign of trouble at all, you're on your own. Mr. Garak, I believe that's the first completely honest thing you've ever said to me." How perceptive of you, Commander. That's another amazing quote. So I've got to be honest. This episode, Second Skin, is about Kira finding out she's really a Cardassian, and at the end of the episode, she finds out she's not really a Cardassian, whatever. And that storyline was it was okay for me. The reason why I like this episode as much as I do is because of Garak. If it wasn't for Garak, I think this episode was pretty forgettable, and you can push it under the rug. But Garak's inclusion in this is so awesome, especially that line where he's outright sort of honest with Commander, who Sisko sort of cons him on going on this mission with him to Cardassian space, which is obviously dangerous for him to go. And so that was a great line. But also towards the end of the episode, where he meets up with Intech, the one who's sort of pulling the strings behind the scheme, who apparently they know, and Garak says he rather likes Intech. In fact, he says that right after he vaporizes him and kills him. And that's another awesome Garak moment, that he could just show up there and be like, "Oh yeah," and just kill the guy and be like, "You know what, I actually like that guy." Great Garak moment. So this is another great Garak episode. So then we get to my number 6, which is Crossover. "Tomorrow morning, she will be gone. Gone? She will be gone! Please don't make me use some foolish euphemism." Now, again, this isn't really Garak. This is the Mirror Universe Garak, but still a great Garak episode nonetheless, because he is the first officer on this station. And it's funny how they chose Garak to be the character to represent the Cardassians. I remember saying, oh, maybe they should choose Dukat, but then they made a point of, the whole point of the mirror universe is to flip things on its head. And Dukat being a villain isn't really flipping things on its head, that's the way it always is. So Garak being the villain is kind of flipping things on its head, because the Garak we know, of course, is he's kind of have this loose alliance, or at least he works with our main characters from time to time. But it's funny how little different, how this character isn't that much different from our Prime Universe Garak, I should say. How he's pretty much the same. He just has different allegiances, which makes a lot of sense. It's not like Kira, who's like a completely different character, the Intendant, but Garak is pretty much the same guy. He's just in the way he reacts to this, and especially how he tries to manipulate Kira in this episode, how he's constantly trying to kill the Intendant in order to take over the station, is pretty true to his character. So it's another great Garak episode. Okay, so next we get to number 5, which is Civil Defense. Even your own computer program turns against you. Always knew your short-sightedness would be your downfall. So this is the episode we get to see the Dukat and Garak feud come into full force, where we saw the two kind of interacting Cardassians, but they didn't actually interact, they just glared at each other, and they were and Garak was working behind the scenes to sabotage Dukat. But here we see the two actually confront each other, and they constantly, Dukat says, oh, I should have killed you, and Garak is like, well, you tried, but you failed, and he's just constantly like putting Dukat down. Is great interactions, great Garak moments, and also the fact that Garak, as sort of being helpful to the crew in this crisis where this Cardassian virus takes over the station, puts everyone's lives in danger, he actually uses his sort of Cardassian influence to try to help them, which was interesting, but I think they did it in a way which stayed true to his character, because obviously he's not going to want to die, and it's probably in his interest to save lives. In fact, the way he puts this in the episode, oh, I'd like nothing more than to help my loyal customers. And it's funny that he put it that way. He's so cavalier about, obviously you should save lives, but he's like, oh, I want to help my loyal customers. He has to put it in that way. Pretty funny, pretty good Garak episode. So number 4 is What You Leave Behind. Damar's dead. What a pity. He died trying to free Cardassia. What's left of it kills Weyoum. I wish you hadn't done that. That was Weyoum's last clone. I was hoping you'd say that. So this is the more gritty portrayal of Garak. This is, of course, the final episode of Deep Space Nine, where Cardassia was completely destroyed and leveled by the Dominion, and you see Garak sort of fighting with the Resistance that's now become an outright civilian revolution, and trying to storm the Dominion headquarters to kill the female shapeshifter. And this is a very gritty portrayal of Garak. So this isn't like the funny, deceptive, whatever. This is him sort of at his prime, and I think this is why I put it so high on the list, because it was really interesting seeing this side of Garak, who is just in primal fight or flight mode. And of course he does get in that side about killing Weyoum, but that's more dark than what we usually get. And another great quote is at the end of the episode, where he's talking to Bashir, and Bashir's trying to console him about Cardassia will survive, and he just starts freaking out, and is like, of course it will survive, but it's not the Cardassia I knew, which is a really great sort of raw Garak moment to see him. And then he comes to terms with it, and he actually parts with Bashir on really good terms, and says, I valued your friendship, which is a really touching moment. So yeah, this was a very high quality Garak episode. So then we get to number 3, which is The Wire. Out of all the stories you told me, which ones were true and which ones weren't? My dear doctor, they're all true. Even the lies, especially the lies. That's a great quote. So this is like, I would say this is the best Andrew Robinson performance. Like this performance he gives in this episode as Garak was absolutely stunning. Hell, he has like he's suffering through like physical withdrawals from this like anti-torture device that he was apparently using the entire time, and it's like he goes through 3 iterations like of Garak when he confesses to Bashir of what really happened and why he was exiled from Bajor. First iteration I think is him sort of being more sort of confessing. And the second iteration, he's like angry, he's upset, he can't believe how he had pity on these people, and he's just like despicable Garak. And the third iteration was like nice Garak, like polite, oh, I regret blah blah blah. And it's interesting seeing those different iterations of him and how they all sort of represent little facets of his overall character, and that's exemplified in that line at the end that I just read, that everything, they're all true, even the lies, especially the lies, which is an amazing line. And we get the sort of journey of Garak, and we get hints at his backstory, but it's never fully explained. And I think that's great. I love how it's never fully explained, because I think fully explaining it kind of ruins it, because there is a book that Andrew Robinson co-wrote that came out after Deep Space Nine finished, where he did lay out Garak's backstory. And I gotta be honest, I find it kind of disappointing. I didn't find it very satisfying when they laid out exactly how he got exiled. I was kind of like, yeah. I think it's better left to the imagination. It's better hinted at like it was in this episode, which is the first episode that truly explored Garak's character. So, great episode for that. So, number 2 on my list is Improbable Calls, and the die is cast. Is there anything you want me to do while you're gone? Like what? I don't know. Any unfinished business? Actually, Doctor, there is something. What? If you go into my quarters and you examine the bulkhead next to the replicator, you'll notice there's a false panel. Behind that panel is a compartment containing an isolinear rod. If I'm not back within 78 hours, I want you to take that rod and eat it. Eat it? You're joking. Yes, Doctor, I am. Very funny. Well, I thought so. That's probably my funniest Garak line. In fact, it was hard to choose a specific Garak line from this episode because there's so many great episodes, so many great quotes in both these episodes, especially the first part where you get, Bashir explains the boy who cried wolf story to him, and he's like, Garak's like, are you sure the point is you shouldn't lie, and not the point is actually you shouldn't tell the same line twice, and all these other quotes. And his interactions with Odo is great to see that relationship explored and built on. And again, Garak always gets more snippy when a character sort of pushes back to his sort of deceptiveness and tries to call him out on his bullshit, and that's when Garak gets a bit more sort of snippy and a bit more vile, I would say, and that happens, of course, with Odo, who keeps pushing back because Odo can see through his bullshit, which is really interesting. And they build this sort of bond that then you buy in the following episode where Garak is forced to torture Odo, that he actually regrets it, because they earned Garak feeling that, because you could tell that Odo had earned Garak's respect, and seeing that journey like go through the completion and what it meant for the Romulan Cardassian alliance and the bigger sort of political implications, but we see it through Garak's through line in the story. And again, he's so amazing in this episode, especially the first one, which is why I kind of like the first one better, because Garak that's where you get prime Garak, where he's just deceiving, he's lying, he's like throwing bullshit, and you see Odo calling him out on this bullshit. Absolutely amazing, and I think it's what makes this two-parter so great and so beloved by fans. So before I get into my number 1 favorite Garak episode, let me just really quickly list off some honorable mentions, because I know there will be some people in the comments being like, what about this episode? What about that episode? So they were considered, I will say. So let me just mention briefly the episodes that were considered for this top 10 but didn't quite make it. There's Impak Nor, In Purgatory's Shadow and by Inferno's Light, Things Past, Body Parts, The Way of the Warrior, Past Prologue, The Dogs of War, and Our Man Bashir. So, let me get to my number one favorite Garak episode, which shouldn't be a surprise to anyone because I think this is most people's favorite Garak episodes. In fact, most people's favorite Deep Space Nine episodes. This is one of my all-time favorite episodes of the entire Star Trek franchise, and that is In the Pale Moonlight. That's why you came to me, isn't it, Captain? Because you knew I could do those things that you weren't capable of doing. Well, it worked, and you'll get what you want, a war between the Romulans and the Dominion, and if your conscience is bothering you, you should soothe it with the knowledge that you may have just saved the entire Alpha Quadrant, and all it costs is the life of one Romulan senator, one criminal, and the self-respect of one Starfleet officer. I don't know about you, but I'd call that a bargain. What can I say about this episode? This episode is amazing. In fact, this is, I would say, is peak Garak. This is like, I don't know, some of these like 4th season, 5th season episodes, you notice I left off the list because that's why I felt like in that turn they were making Garak, the writers were making Garak a bit too nice, a bit too friendly. That was sort of, especially the start of season 6 during the Dominion takeover arc. He just seemed like another sort of Starfleet officer helping, Sisko and the others. And so it seemed like for a while they were making Garak, oh, he's our friend now. He's a really nice guy. This episode, they sort of bring it back, and they give you true Garak of what he's deceptive, he's lying, and in fact, I think this is the most Garak that we've ever seen of Garak, if that makes any sense. This is the episode where he totally pulls the strings. He manipulates people from the start. He manipulates Sisko, tells him what he wants to hear and what he thinks he can get away with in order for him to do what he knows he needs to do. And ultimately, he knows that once he's done it, that Sisko will agree with him, which he does. And after he gave this great speech where he lays it out, and Sisko, even though he hates himself and he lost all of his self-respect, he totally agrees with what Garak had to do. I mean, this Garak freaking assassinates a Romulan senator. And it's hinted at that he's done shit like this in the past, but we never actually see it. So it's great to actually see him like pull this diabolical plan and put it into motion, and you get some amazing interactions with Garak and Sisko, because we get a lot of Garak and Bashir, and we get some Garak and Odo as well, but this is like the peak Garak and Sisko, and you see him sort of manipulating the Starfleet captain in order to accomplish what they both want to accomplish, but in a way that he knows that Starfleet would not be okay with, and it's simply amazing. This is an amazing episode, and an amazing Garak episode as well. So that's it for my top 10 favorite Garak episodes. This has been a Patreon suggested video. If you want to support my channel on Patreon, it'll be very much appreciated. I'll have a link in the description below. If you contribute $1 or more, you can get access to my Patreon only videos, as well as schedules of all the videos I plan on doing in the coming months. And if you can select the $10 or more option, you can also get to suggest videos like this one. So thank you to all the patrons who support my channel, and thank you so much for anyone who's watching this. Be sure to check out my channel as I continue to do many more Star Trek videos, as well as other videos on shows like Game of Thrones, The Expanse, Mr. Robot, and more. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.